All right, today I thought I would show you how I'm going to prepare my logo, my personal logo. In this case, I'm using a logo from a local business, and I'm going to show you how you will approach the export function from Rhino to prepare for vinyl cutting. This video in particular is going to kind of set the basis for a workflow that you will follow for exporting to the laser cutter eventually, and then also to the 3D printer. There will be subtle differences in that export function, but this kind of sets the foundation for learning how to output a file to a physical object. And so right now we're just working with this virtual logo, but we then need to output this to a physical machine. So it's very important that we get this workflow down, and so I just want to kind of spend some time and go over all the steps, and then I'm going to also include how to use the vinyl cutter so that when we're back on campus, if you ever need to access a vinyl cutter, you're going to know how to use that, or if you decide you might want to purchase your own vinyl cutter, you'll be able to do that as well. So here you see I've got my logo. This is actually for the Todd General Store. And this logo was designed by a student, but then I've now taken that into Rhino and colored it so that the client can see what the colors would look like. And I've brought in an image of their store and actually put that vector drawing over the top of their store, so they get an idea of like scale and size. And this is really nice. And I do this a lot for potential clients to show them how something might look before it's actually created. So again, one more place where Rhino is very good for being able to save a little time and also maybe help you land a job in the future that you're trying to secure. So I've got that. In this case, we do not need the hatches. You'll notice that I have hatches in place to be able to show the color. So those are separate colors that are brought in, and so now I'm just going to take that the individual sign, the vector. You can see I've done several modifications, and this is for a job that I did later on for them for laser cutting a sample file. But I just want to bring this sample file and export that into my vinyl cutting software. Now right now I am in millimeters. Now that will be an issue because my vinyl cutter reads in inches. So you're going to need to convert your file to inches. So I'm just going to show you. You can go ahead and just go to File Settings, and we'll go over to the units, and we'll be able to change that to inches. And it'll ask if we want to scale. And in this case, I'm going to say yes. And once that's been done, then I can come back and I can start sizing this to the dimensions that I want to. Now you're going to do this for both your negative positive design and for your personal logo that you're creating. Remember, the negative positive design is going to be about 4 inches by 4 inches, and your logo will be 3 inches in at least one dimension. So in this case, if I want to make this 4 inches, I'm going to make the long axis or the short axis 4 inches. So to do that, I'm going to say Transform, Scale, 2D. Remember, this is a 2D object. There's no thickness to this. And then I can click here and here, and I can just type in 4 and enter. And so if I want to verify that, I can use my dimension tab, say linear dimension, and I can draw a line from there, and we see that it's 4 inches. All right, now, if I have this file ready and it's been already sized, it's a lot easier to size it here than it is to do that in the software, the vinyl cutting software. So that's why I did that here. And then you'll notice I'm going to select the object and then say File, Export Selected, because I've got a lot of other stuff in the drawing that I don't want to export necessarily. So I just want to export that singular design. Remember to do this. If you export multiple things and they have space between them, that can wind up costing you a lot of money because you're wasting vinyl and we're not able to move those designs tighter. So if you were going to do multiple designs together, you'd want to think about spacing. That's something that students don't usually think about, especially if they're not paying for the vinyl themselves. And so I'm just going to export this as a singular object, and I can always make copies and shift those around within the space in the vinyl cutting software. So we've selected it. We're going to say File, Export Selected. And then we're going to be able to save this to our desktop. So this is Todd General Store sign. And I'm going to save this as an AI, an Illustrator file. That's the file type you need. If you do not give me that AI file, I will not be able to cut your vinyl. So you need to make sure that you've scaled it properly and that you have closed regions and that you don't have any stray lines or duplicate lines. And then you can export as an AI file, and you hit export. Now you'll get a pop-up window that'll come up and it'll say preserve model scale, and you want to make sure that's selected, and then it should say 1 inch equals 1 inch. Ours says 1 millimeter, so I need to change that, so pay very close attention, otherwise the drawing will come in at the wrong scale. And then I'm just going to say export, and you'll notice down here it says file successfully written as user, and you can see the file is there. So we now have the file prepared. Okay, so everything is good there. We can save our Rhino file if we want to save in inches. If we don't, we can revert back to the previous millimeters. I'm just going to minimize this for now. Now the software that I'm going to be using is a program with a really bad name called Sure Cuts A Lot. It's got a really cheesy name, but it actually is really easy to use. And I have found that it's probably one of the most easy programs for students to be able to utilize. I'll probably do another video on this. It's got other functions where you can actually trace JPEGs and things like that. You can bring in SVGs. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to cover bringing in that AI file. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say File, Import, and then we're going to look for our AI file, which is right there. And if we have brought in, or if we've sized our, scaled our object properly, it should come in and be 4 inches. And you'll notice this is 4 inches in this long dimension. Now, if I'm only going to cut one, I don't need to worry about placement. Right now, I'm working on a mat that is 12 by 12. It just so happens that my vinyl cutter, the one I'm using today, is 12 inches across capacity-wise. Now, most vinyl cutters you can use a roll of vinyl with, so you could actually, even with a very narrow vinyl cutter, you could cut a very long object or sign because of how it comes in on a roll. We're just going to leave this at 12 by 12 since our logo is small, and again we're only going to cut one right now, so I don't have to worry about placement within the screen. It'll automatically default to cutting in the proper location. All right, so the next step is for us to prepare to cut. So the next button we click is called Cutter, and you'll notice that it automatically shows us where on the vinyl cutter this is going to be. In our case, we're using an MH model that's made by US Cutter, and so everything's already preset for us here, and then we're just going to send the file over. Now I'm going to stop here before I send it, and I'm going to do another video that we'll combine this video so that you're able to see actually the use of the vinyl cutter. All right, so this is a vinyl cutter that we're going to be using today. This particular vinyl cutter is sold by a company called US Cutter. You can look them up online, uscutter.com. I have owned a few of their machines over the years. This particular model is called the MH model. And this is an affordable model that is quite robust. And so if you decide that you want to look into this, this would be one avenue that you could go down is through uscutter.com. You could also look at the Cameo Silhouette. Some students have had those in the past. But a vinyl cutter might seem like a tool or a digital fabrication tool that it might not be like the first thing you think of when you think of digital fabrication or rapid prototyping. And I kind of scoffed at the vinyl cutter the first time that I thought about using it. I thought, well, it's just a glorified sticker machine. But we wind up using this a ton to be able to make resist for etching metal in my metals courses. We wind up using it as a way to make templates for things. I've even had students decide that they want to put regular paper into this, and you can change this out with an ink pen instead of a cutting head, and you're able to actually then draw with it. So I've had students that wanted to do a large-scale mural. They're able to actually print out on a piece of paper with the ink pen, have it draw the larger scale drawing, and then they can transfer that to a wall. So it's a very versatile tool for being able to do a variety of things. Now, when you buy the vinyl cutter, you'll get with it usually a catalog that shows different vinyls. So you can get different types of vinyl, ones that are meant for vehicles, for wraps. You could get ones that are meant for signage on a business. There's all sorts of options in terms of the vinyls, and they make specialty vinyls. We got it over here. I've got some carbon fiber, replica carbon fiber vinyl. So, you know, there's just a whole multitude of different things that you can do in terms of purchasing vinyl. There's even thermal vinyls that you can iron on to clothing if you want to put a logo on a piece of clothing. So again, lots and lots of options with the vinyl. And I actually have a student who took my class, my digital fabrication class. He's a graphic designer. And as soon as he got out of school, he started a business where he was just doing signage for businesses and for vehicles, and has made a pretty good living just off of the knowledge that he gained from doing vinyl cutting. So you just, you know, you never know where you might be able to use this. So the first step we're going to do is we're going to turn the machine on. There's a power button right here, and that's going to make the machine start up, and you're going to see the head move, and it usually zeroes itself. It's got a little limit switch right here. I'm going to show you just briefly. You can actually take the cutting tool out. There's a little, you loosen this knob, and then you can open up this arm. And I'm just going to show you that on the inside of this is a small blade. There's the blade. I don't know if you can see that. It's pretty small. And this blade rides inside this housing. Now, sometimes this housing, you'll even see here, it'll get little particles of vinyl from the cutting as things kind of get lifted, and you might get little chunks of vinyl, and that can sometimes interfere with your vinyl cut. So I always like to just double check this. I always have students maybe having difficulty, and so I'll just kind of blow that out and make sure there are no chunks. Now, you do want to be careful. This blade is sharp, and so just be very cautious with it. And again, this will just slide right back in to position if we don't have anything blocking its path. So this blade lifts out, and then it just slides right back in, and it's magnetic. There's a little magnet in here that pulls it back in. Now, you want to be careful. This button right here actually pokes it out. So I've had students before where they accidentally poke this, and they poke it through their fingers. So be very, very cautious with that blade, and in the fact that it's being sharp. And then also this is what kind of makes it protrude through the housing. Now, this housing is preset. You can set this for a depth. I don't want you to mess with that. If you ever approach a vinyl cutter and it's already been set up, you shouldn't need to mess with that setting at all. And then we just slide this back into position. We just close the lever, and then we can just tighten this down. Now, this is plastic, so you don't want to over tighten this, okay? And then again, your level should be right about here. Now, you'll notice there's a strip where the vinyl cutter actually, if it does cut through the paper, the vinyl, it shouldn't, but if it does, it will contact that and not tear up the blade or your machine. All right, now on the back side, there are two levers, and these levers are almost like presser feet on a sewing machine. To grip the vinyl, you make sure these are in the down position, okay? And they control these rollers right here. Now, these rollers are quite fragile as well. There's plastic on the housing. There is a steel rod, but there's plastic around this housing. So you be very cautious. And you can move these into different positions based on the size of your vinyl. So again, if you've got a small chunk of vinyl, you have to make sure you've got two presser feet pressing that vinyl down. So I'm going to feed the vinyl in and show you how this works. Now, you can feed it through the back, you can feed it through the front. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to pull this through, and I'm going to run this all the way up to the edge here. Now, I can use this factory edge if it's straight, and I can line that up with that strip, and then I can use my presser feet to press down to secure the vinyl so it can't move. Now, a couple warnings here. If you put this all the way up against the edge right here, like that, that can sometimes be a problem, because if you don't have this in straight, it'll want to bunch up. Now, I usually run it with about a 1/4 inch or so away from that. I've seen students put the vinyl in like this all the way over. If you think about it, your cutting head cannot go any farther than this because the head is all the way over. So if that's the case, you're losing all that usable vinyl. So again, I try to run this over so I'm not losing as much vinyl I can always, trim that off later and run it through a different way, but that's what we want. So press our feet down and the vinyl is secured. All right, now the buttons on the vinyl cutter, you've got different options for it. You'll notice there's a reset button. I'm going to push that to show you. That just resets the machine and resets its origin, or its 00. Every CNC, which basically means computer numeric control machine, which is what we're going to use with all of our digital fabrication machines, they're all CNC machines, right? A vinyl cutter, a laser cutter. I mean, even your printer at home technically is being controlled by a computer and it's being told where to actually place ink. And so all machines are going to have a homing area or an origin. And so in the case of this machine, the origin is right over here. It's all the way over. So when I hit reset, it basically resets our axes so that we know the machine is ready to go. Now, if we did want to change the origin position, we could do that. If we had already cut something here and we wanted to move the origin over, we could set the origin basically by moving the machine over to that area and then hitting the origin button. In this case, we don't need to do that. We're going to start right here as our corner for our origin. Every CNC machine has an origin that it's going to begin with, so the machine has to zero itself. So when I hit reset, the machine will basically reset its origin. So that happens to be over here where the limit switch is on the machine, a little red button, so it has to come all the way to this side to be able to reset to its origin. Now, if we want to move the machine around, we can go to offline pause, and then we're able to actually jog the machine around. So I can hold down on this button and I can feed the vinyl in and out. And so if I just want to jog it, that's called jogging the machine. And if I want to move the cutting head, I can use these two buttons and I can move this around. So this is how I can set a different origin. So if I wanted to set my origin right here, I could hit origin, and now it's ready to start cutting from that point. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit reset just so we can go back to our beginning origin. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that if you were to touch these buttons without that offline or pause button being pushed, that's going to adjust something else. I want to show you on this screen. What's going to happen is if I hit this, you'll notice my cut pressure is changed. That's the pressure that the blade actually gets pushed down. So hitting these buttons, with this not pushed, is going to alter that. That can throw off how deep your blade plunges into your vinyl. And so you might actually wind up cutting something, and if the pressure is not great enough, the sticker won't peel out well. Or if it's too deep, it'll cut through the backer, because there's a backing that's on here, a protective backing, and we don't want to cut through that. The idea is that we would only cut through the colored portion, the top layer, which is the actual vinyl. Now, the other thing that is controlled, as I mentioned earlier, we were able to control the cut pressure with the left and right buttons, but with the up and down, we can change the cut speed. So this is the speed at which the machine runs. When you're cutting a very detailed drawing, you might want to slow that down quite a bit, because it'll actually make it cut a little bit cleaner so that it's not lifting out the small details. I'm just going to leave it right where it's at, but we're setting it a cut pressure of 310 and then also 50. Now, one thing I can do is if I want to test my pressure without cutting my full design and wasting my vinyl, I can hit the test button, and this will cut a test shape that allows us to double check and see if the vinyl is going to lift out. So in this case, I could hit offline, and then I could go ahead and move this, and I can see whether or not the vinyl was cut through or not. So you can see I actually started to cut through the paper, so my pressure is maybe a little bit too much. You can see where we cut the paper, see how that's peeled up right there? So again, I could lighten that pressure just slightly, and that'll help with lifting as well, lifting of the vinyl as you're cutting. So I'm going to go back and hit reset. Well, actually, let's move this back just a little bit. And I'll start cutting after that point, okay? And we're going to hit reset. And then maybe I'll change my pressure just a little bit so it's less. So maybe 300. Okay, so now we're ready to start cutting. So the next step is to go back to our program, which is SureCuts-A-Lot. And we've got our file in SureCuts-a-Lot ready to go. Apparently we don't. All right, so we're gonna, as we had shown earlier, we're gonna import our file. We got our Todd General Store, we hit open. And if we've done everything in terms of our sizing and our scaling of our design properly, all we have to do is go to cut. Remember, we're using our MH model. We're connected with a USB connection right here. And then we're ready to cut. And you'll notice that it automatically shoves it all the way over to the origin in our positioning. And you can zoom in on this if you want to be able to see this. So that's where it's gonna start cutting from. All right, we're just gonna hit cut. And then our machine starts to cut. And you can see we're getting a little bit of lifting of our vinyl, so I might have my pressure still set a little too deep. And I can adjust that on the fly if I want to. And I can also slow down the machine on the fly. And that was pretty detailed. So there will come a point where the scale of the object might be too small, depending on the detail and the scale of the detail that you have. So you have to think about that in terms of your logo and the scale that you're cutting something. If we scale this larger, right, it's going to cut no problem because, you know, we're losing a little bit here at this scale. So we might increase the scale slightly if we were worried about that. It would also help with the peeling. This should be the outline of the design. So it usually starts at the center, cuts the center components out, and then works its way to the outside. And the machine will return to its home position. And then we're ready to lift the presser feed out, and we can lift our design out, and there's what we're left with. Now, this design will have to be weeded, all right? So that's our next step, is to weed the design. All right, now I'm gonna go ahead and just trim this. It's very helpful. You wanna make sure you're doing this on a cutting mat if you're in a studio on campus in the future. I want to make sure you don't do this against the table. And I'm just going to trim this excess off. Remember, a tip is instead of trying to cut all the way through, taking several light cuts with your X-Acto blade, and that will usually make your cuts more precise. All right, now the weeding component, we want to make sure that we are able to, with the weeding, we want to make sure we're able to decide what is positive and what is negative. So this is a case where you have to make a decision. Now I'm going to send your design to you in this state, and then you're going to be able to weed this yourself. So you'll make the determination as to what is pulled out and what isn't. But I'm going to go ahead on this design, and I'm going to decide to pull out this part. And you'll notice I just kind of get underneath the vinyl, and I'm able to pull that, and I should be able to just pull that straight out if it's cut deep enough. Now this just becomes waste. So that's the weeded part that we got rid of, that we didn't want. Now, when it comes to like small text like this, you'll have to be very delicate with how you pull out the vinyl, making sure you don't release the design. There's something very satisfying about being able to weed the design and reveal the object you created. And this is a case where I'm using my X-Acto to kind of hold down on the areas that maybe want to lift a little bit as I'm trying to pull them up. And this happens when you have a little chunk that wants to stick to itself. And so we can just kind of tap that down lightly. And we can pull that right out, just like that. And again, that's just going to be waste material. And then we'll pull out this center. They make a little tool you can buy for this for weeding. I just like to use an X-Acto. It works just fine. So just kind of pick at it. And then we can lift those little details out right there. I just kind of stab those. And then we've got a few little details there in the middle of this one. And this one. Sometimes they want to stick to themselves and they're kind of hard to get out of there. Got a little chunk there. I'm going to roll with that though. And then if I wanted to, I could go ahead and lightly cut. I'm not going to cut all the way through this. I'm just going to cut through the vinyl. To reveal our border, right? Because we have a border in place here. So now I can peel this out and reveal the border that was cut by the vinyl cutter. All right, and there's our sticker, our finished sticker. All right, now we have to be able to transfer this sticker in the future to whatever it is we're going to stick it on. And so for that, we use a material called transfer tape. This is a, it's kind of a low tack tape. It's kind of similar to painter's tape, a little less tacky than it even. And normally I just peel off a little bit of this, and you can use scissors to cut this. I've got my X-Acto here to cut with this. I'll just use that. And I only need a little chunk. Of this tape. Just need enough tape to cover our design. And so the idea here is that we apply this to over the top of our design. And I try to make sure I don't get any wrinkles in it. Although if I get a wrinkle in it, it's not a huge deal because this is going to come off. So these wrinkles won't be a problem. In practice, so it's good to not get wrinkles. And then we use a squeegee to make sure that we adhere the sticker to the transfer tape. And then I come back, and to finish our sticker off, we want to craft this well. So I'm just going to use my ruler as a guide, and I'll trim the sticker. And I'll trim the sticker here. we'll go ahead and trim top and bottom. As I mentioned, I've had several students buy vinyl cutters after seeing this demo. I've had one student I mentioned that started a business. Also had another student that started a sticker business while he was in college to help sustain his business that he started in college. So this is the finished sticker. Now the way that you apply this is that you basically would peel up the transfer tape, and if you've squeegeed enough, what should happen is the backing should come right up with the sticker. So you can see where that's not quite coming up, so I could either come back and re-squeegee that area a little bit. I've used a credit card in the past, that works fine, or an ID. And the reason this is not lifting well is because you can see where I've cut through my paper. See the paper lift, or the backing paper lifting with that? So that's why it's having problems. So my pressure was still set a little too high. And so once that peels back, we're left with a place where we can stick that. So I'm just going to stick it out here on my cutting mat so you can see it. And we'll stick that on. And this is important to make sure that you get this laid on smoothly. They do make a spray that you can actually spray on that help assist in applying if you're going to apply this to a surface that you were worried about alignment or any wrinkles. In this case, it's a small thing, so I'll just work from one corner and I'll work my way over. And the idea would be that then you're able to take that transfer tape and we just peel it. And if you peel this transfer tape low, kind of keeping it flat, not trying to pull upward, but keeping it low, it should just peel right back. And we've applied our design to our object. And there you have it. There's your final design. So that's what we'll do with your designs. I'll be sending your final designs for your personal logo and for your 4x4 negative positive design. I'll send that to you cut but not weeded. I'll send you a little piece of transfer tape or some pieces of transfer tape, and you'll be able to weed and then apply your transfer tape and then stick the sticker on whatever you want. So one last thing I'll just mention about the vinyl cutter that I didn't mention earlier. When we are lining up, if someone has cut the vinyl previously and it doesn't have the factory edge from that, one thing I like to do is if I'm going to line it up, I will put my pressure down and then I'll go ahead and hit offline, and I'll use this to make sure that it's feeding evenly and straight. And I'm just going to demo this. If I get this off, I'll show you if I change it drastically. If it's like this, what will happen? So I don't have it in there straight, and so if I use my jog feature, you'll see that it's bunching up there because it's not feeding straight. So that's one little pro tip I like to show students to make sure that they have this straight. They can jog the machine. And again, that idea of jogging is kind of synonymous with all CNC machines. You can jog a laser cutter, you can jog a CNC router or mill, so, or 3D printer for that matter. So just a little one last tip I just wanted to mention about that. So thanks so much for watching. You can be expecting to get your logo in the mail once you've submitted it to As You Learn, and I will make sure and get it cut this weekend or the beginning of this next week and get it sent to you. Hope you enjoyed.